After studying this module, you shall be able to familiarize yourself with the case study method and its distinguishing characteristics, know the history of the method and its applications in the present day, understand the rationale behind the method and why it is conducted, and evaluate the method and weigh its advantages and limitations. Introduction to case study. Famous groundbreaking case studies. The erratic case of Phineas Gage. In 19th century Vermont, Phineas Gage worked as a railroad worker. He suffered a severe brain injury when a 43-inch stamping iron that he was using to pack explosive powder into a hole detonated. It drove through his brain and out through the top of his skull. Although he miraculously survived, his friends and family noticed changes in his behavior. He seemed to have lost his inhibitions, grown impatient and violent, and behaved inappropriately in public. Gage's case was studied by Dr. John Martin Harlow and examined the effect of severe brain injury, specifically the frontal lobe, on a person's personality. This famous case study provides seminal work on how damage to the frontal lobe can impact human behavior, mood, and personality. Jeannie, the feral child. Feral children is a term used to describe children who have been raised in environments of extreme social depravity and isolation. Abandonment of the child is a major cause along with child abuse. Malnourishment, in conjugation with insufficient mental stimulation, results in stunted cognitive development. Found in 1970, at the age of 13, Jeannie was a feral child who had spent the majority of her life strapped to a potty chair in her bedroom. This was motivated by her father's belief that she was mentally retarded, which necessitated action to protect her. She was physically abused every time she uttered a word or made a sound. The result of such abuse was severely deficient mental and physical development, in addition to the inability to talk properly. After being rescued by caregivers, Jeannie made some progress, including learning to communicate with them by means of nonverbal cues. Unfortunately, as monetary resources and research vigor diminished, Jeannie passed through multiple foster homes and today, at 54 years of age, is psychologically restricted. The defense mechanism of regression has come into play, and she now copes with situations with silence. Jeannie's story contributed widely to theories of both psychological and linguistic nature. It demonstrated the importance of enculturation in the acquisition of social skills. Mental stimulation from a young age is key for the development of motor and sensory skills. Jeannie's case lends support to the critical period hypothesis of language acquisition. Post the initial few years of life, which was considered as the critical developmental period, learning a language becomes increasingly difficult for a human. Having missed this period of development, Jeannie was unable to ever converse using a grammatically correct verbal language. Jill Price. Jill Price is a patient with hyperthymesia, a rare condition of possessing an incredible memory that permits her to remember various insignificant aspects of her life in remarkable detail. She can, for instance, remember her dinner from 2 decades ago on an undistinguished afternoon. This capacity of incredible memory has caused her severe emotional trauma because she remembers in detail every painful remark or event in her life. She actively participates in studies to reveal more about the psychological aspects of this condition. More current memory tests, however, show how Mrs. Price isn't really a memory whiz and that her expertise has been exaggerated. She is unable to memorize a new list of words with pronounced accuracy. Her memory in many ways is average. She can remember popular events, but only if she can find them in some way pertinent to herself. One of the significant, previously underestimated aspects of Mrs. Price's condition is her OCD-like symptoms. She has the tendency to hoard and feels compelled to systematize her life. Perhaps most importantly, she spends a considerable amount of time consistently thinking about herself and events that takes place in her life, precisely encoding them into her memory. HM. Attempts to trace the development of neuroscience bring to light one of the most critical cases in the history of the field, that of Henry Gustav Mollazen. When Mollazen was 9, a bicycle accident caused serious damage to his brain, which led to multiple seizures. In 1953, as a final attempt at curing these spasms, surgeons removed layers of tissue from his hippocampus, an area that is dominant in the construction of long-term memories. As a result, Mollazen now suffered from severe amnesia. His condition made him incapable of creating new memories. Furthermore, even recollections from the past were impacted by mild retrograde amnesia, which resulted in him being able to recall only faint images of his childhood. Dr. Brenda Milner's analysis of HM's case consequently aided the study of human memory and memory disorders. In multiple trials, Dr. Milner had HM perform an elementary motor task. At each trial, HM experienced the task as an entirely new phenomena. However, in spite of this feeling of unfamiliarity, HM gradually became more skilled at the task with practice. This points to the conclusion that HM had been classically conditioned to perform the task without him being aware of any learning taking place. Dr. Milner's study demonstrated how memory consists of two systems that operate simultaneously. The first is explicit and declarative. It includes facts that we are aware of and are able to declare. These abilities are determined by the hippocampus, which in HM's case had been partially removed by surgery. The other system is that of retention, a function that takes place independent of conscious remembrance. In HM's case, this was demonstrated in his subconscious recollection of motor functions. These results radically transformed the perception of memory and the neurological structures and processes that guide it. Case study method in research. What is case study? Let's begin by understanding what case study as a method in behavioral research is. A case study is a qualitative research method involving an in-depth and detailed investigation to gather information about one or more individuals or groups. It lays emphasis on studying few cases in great depth instead of gaining surface information about many cases. As Madan, Paliwal and Bhardwaj in 2011 pointed out, it is a method of study in depth rather than breadth. The data is collected not just from one source but many, and the researcher during the course of the study employs several research tools such as interviews, observation and psychometric tests, individually or in combination, to comprehensively and exhaustively study the aspect of concern. For example, a researcher interested in conducting a case study on an autistic child might observe the child in different settings, interview the parents, and administer psychometric tests to draw inferences about the behavior of interest. The holistic understanding of the child will thus be gained by putting together and analyzing the data collected from multiple sources. Definition of case study method. Different authors define case study in their own distinctive ways. Young, in her book Scientific Social Surveys and Research, describes case study as a comprehensive study of a social unit, be that unit a person, a group, a social institution, a district or a community. Her definition incorporates drawing inferences about each and every aspect being studied in minute details. Odom and Joshua in 1929 believed the case study method is a technique by which individual factor, whether be it an institution or just an episode in a life of an individual or a group, is analyzed in its relationship to any other in the group. Thus, a fairly exhaustive study of a person or group is called or a life or case study. Characteristics of the case study method. Common to all definitions are certain characteristics which distinguish the case study method from others. Thus, by its very nature, the case study is descriptive. The data collected in a case study comprises of description of psychological processes and events and the context in which they occur. Quantitative data, such as the frequency of a behavior of interest, may be present, but the emphasis is always on elaborating on when, how, and where of the behavior. Narrow. Although a case study might be conducted on a group, it is rarely done in practice due to factors such as time and resources. A case study, therefore, usually concerns itself with one particular individual and one or few aspects of the individual. For example, a researcher studying peer interaction on social networking sites in adolescents would limit his concern to just that and not study other aspects of social interaction, such as parent-child relationship, highly detailed. Being a qualitative method, case study is capable of producing thick descriptions about the individual, event, or behavior of interest. Its narrow and case-centric approach lends to its ability to describe such aspects in great detail. Combination of objective and subjective data. The data collected in a case study is capable of representing any combination of objective and subjective data. The description of behavior and its context accounts for the objective aspect, which is supplemented by details of the subjective matters such as feelings, beliefs, impressions, and interpretations. This quality of integrating different types of data helps in achieving an in-depth understanding of a single individual. Process-oriented. Case studies allow the researcher to explore and describe the nature of processes occurring over time instead of following the snapshot approach to studying behavior, which only takes into account the behavior and experiences as they occur at a single point in time. This facilitates the study of changes that might occur over time. It is for this reason that researchers studying developmental psychology, as we also read in Jeannie's case study given in the introduction, often employ the case study method. Evolution of case study and its uses. The use of case study as a methodology has a long history within the sciences, social sciences, and humanities. It can be traced back to the 1930s when it started being used in medical research. Through a case study, medical practitioners would take detailed history of illnesses suffered by the patient. The case study method has the distinct quality of allowing the researcher to make inferences outside the laboratory in natural settings while retaining the scientific quality of the method of data collection and the research as a whole. As such, it gained significance as a research methodology for identifying rich sources of data, further developing into a technique that combines both qualitative and quantitative research. Although initially rooted within a sciences approach, the case study method increased in popularity within the social sciences and has been credited as being especially useful in practice-oriented fields such as management, education, public administration, and the human services. It has been an essential tool for advancing researchers' knowledge of various individuals, groups, events, and phenomena. The case study method was first used by Frederick Lepley on cyclic changes that contribute to decline or rise in family morale. Dr. William Healy used this method in 1912 to study juvenile delinquency and considered it as a better method over and above the mere use of statistical data, which he believed restricts the scope of social sciences. Case studies have been widely used in psychology, and amongst the best were the ones carried out by Sigmund Freud. He conducted extremely comprehensive investigations into the private lives of his patients in order to both understand and help them overcome their illnesses. The best known of Freud's case studies include Little Hans and the Rat Man. In keeping with this long history, case histories continue to remain one of the primary methods of investigation within abnormal psychology and psychiatry. For students of these disciplines, they can give a vivid insight into mental illnesses as well as patients suffering from them. This insight can then be used to trigger further, more specific research focusing on issues such as effectiveness of treatment plans, onset of disorders, factors that influence etiology, etc. Similarly, anthropologists, historians, novelists, etc. have also used this method concerning problems pertaining to their areas of interest. The case study method is also used by management experts to study clues pertaining to several management problems. Therefore, the use of this method permeates the boundaries of a particular discipline and is effectively used in different fields. Assumptions and reasons for conducting a case study. The choice of the method rests with the researcher depending upon several factors such as the researcher's own skills, the resources available to carry out the study, the logic of the research, its objectives and applications. It is, however, important to understand the rationale behind using a particular method. Assumptions underlying the use of case study method. It is assumed that no matter the individual differences that exist between different cases or individuals, there is certain uniformity across the basic nature of humans which enables case study as a method to draw generalizations, however low the level of generalizability may be. This generalizing ability is greater in natural sciences as opposed to social sciences, as phenomena are understood as being universal. However, because social sciences take into account the individual and or group differences in behavior and experiences, there is always room for exception. Despite this shortcoming, case study method is used to understand phenomena as they occur across individuals. For example, developmental psychologists often use case studies to track stages of development in children. It is a well-known fact that certain developmental milestones must be achieved at a particular stage. Since the stages of development are more or less consistent in the normal population, case study can be effectively used to draw generalizations in such cases. The history of the unit of study can be exhaustively explored and researched using a case study, giving the researcher an elaborate timeline of the individual's life as it occurred. Case studies are often longitudinal, that is, done over a period of time, allowing the researcher to track changes in the aspect being studied. A case study on displacement of people during the partition of India and Pakistan may involve a comprehensive understanding of life and livelihood of the people before and after the partition and its impact. The fundamental assumption behind the case study method is the comprehensive and elaborate study of the individual or event. One unit is exhaustively studied and focused on to derive maximum information relevant to the objective and scope of the study. This in itself gives the researcher using the case study method a wider perspective than most other methods. Why is a case study conducted? According to Kulikan, a case study may be conducted for the following reasons. Outstanding cases. The cases are studied because they are so rare and intrinsically interesting in themselves. The distinctiveness of a case becomes a huge factor in itself, which in turn leads to the selection of this method for carrying out research. For instance, an exceptionally talented individual's life and his extraordinary achievements can be effectively captured using a case study. Contradicting a theory. As mentioned earlier, social sciences understand and accept the existence of exceptions, and thus one single counterexample can prove to be a challenge to any theory. For instance, if a maternally deprived child is found to have developed quite normally in most important respects, then we have to adjust the view that such deprivation is always damaging. Data pool. A mass of information from several case studies can be pooled and analyzed for specific factors that might emerge. Once patterns emerge and are linked with others, more quantitative data might be employed, and this time not on special cases. For example, if a researcher wishes to study the lifestyle of a schizophrenic patient, he or she may choose to make use of several case studies involving different people suffering from schizophrenia and then look at the commonly emerging aspects. Insight: the fact that in-depth case studies contain rich information is one of their unique strengths, even when they might not lead to further quantitative studies. Very often, one might not be able to imagine the special circumstances of the individual nor their ways of coping with adversity. In such situations, finding from a case study can inspire the researchers to formulate new and unique ways of looking at a psychological phenomena, can teach greater empathy and understanding, and can add to our overall psychological knowledge without necessarily testing a specific hypothesis. Evaluation of the case study method. Any research method is a tool of knowledge generation and information gathering in the hands of a researcher. Each method comes with its own set of advantages and limitations, which must be carefully weighed before use. It is the discretion of the researcher to assess these and effectively use the tool for making inferences about the individual and phenomena of interest. Based on this assessment, the researcher decides the appropriateness of the method for his or her research. Advantages: the detailed descriptions and comprehensive study of the individual enable us to gain deep insight. In the words of Charles Horton Cooley, case study deepens our perception and gives us a clearer insight into life. It gets at behavior directly and not by indirect and abstract approach. A thick account of personal experiences can be maintained. This allows the researcher to historically analyze past experiences, which may not be tapped by a method like observation. Individual and social changes can be tracked using case studies, as they are usually done over a period of time. It can combine information from various sources and methods, thus allowing the researcher to look at a particular case from different vantage points and refining his or her knowledge about the case of interest. Each source or tool supplements information from the other and paints a complete picture about the individual. The case study method highlights individual differences and acts as an excellent tool for studying phenomena about which little is known. Therefore, case studies are extensively used in exploratory research. In the case of Phoenix Gage, studied by Dr. John Martin Harlow, the case study method provided a groundbreaking finding about the impact of damage in the frontal lobe on personality and behavior. Limitations: case studies are often done on special, peculiar, and rare individuals or events and hence suffer from low generalizability. The personal experiences of an individual and the inferences drawn about them are not always comparable with other people. The case study method is very time-consuming and costly. The researcher who undertakes a case study must be extremely skilled and rigorously trained in scientific investigation. Critics often suggest that case studies lack scientific rigor and objectivity in terms of the way the data is gathered, presented, and analyzed. Case studies cannot practically be conducted on a large sample of individuals due to time and resource constraints. It is often only the voice of the researcher that is expressed in a case study and is susceptible to subjectivity of the researcher. Summary: case studies are in-depth investigations of an individual, group, event, or community. Typically, data are gathered from a variety of sources and by using several different methods, example, observations and interviews. The case study research method originated in clinical medicine. The data collected is highly descriptive and detailed in nature Narrow in the sense that it focuses on the limited aspects on the case it's studying. The data collected is a combination of objective and subjective data. It is capable of studying changes occurring over time. It assumes that basic human behavior is uniform in certain ways, allowing a certain level of generalization, however low that degree might be. The major reasons for choosing to conduct a case study are to study outstanding cases, contradict an existing theory, generate a data pool, and develop insight into cases. The main advantages of case study as a research method is its capability to help the researcher gain deep insights into the behavior or event of interest and help maintain a detailed account of personal experiences. Combining data from various sources, it helps to highlight individual differences, to even help in studying phenomena about which little is known previously. There are certain limitations to the method though. It studies rare individuals or events and thus suffers from low generalizability and also becomes costlier and more time consuming to conduct. It is for this reason that case studies cannot be conducted on a large number of people. The researcher is required to be highly skilled and trained, and still the method is critiqued for lacking objectivity and depending largely on the voice of the researcher alone.